The morning fog slowly rose above the quiet streets of Richmond as David Harrison turned on the coffee maker and glanced out the kitchen window. In 15 years of marriage, this routine had become sacred to him. Getting up at 6 in the morning, making coffee, reading the local news on his tablet while waiting for Lisa to come down for breakfast before her shift at St. Mary's Hospital. At 42, David still maintained an athletic physique thanks to regular runs around the neighborhood. His graying temples gave him an air of respectability that helped him in his work as an insurance agent. Clients trusted him with their policies and savings. In a small town where everyone knew each other, reputation meant more than advertising. "Good morning, dear." Lisa's soft voice made him turn around. She was coming down the stairs, braiding her chestnut hair into a ponytail. At 39, she looked younger than her age, and every morning David reminded himself how lucky he was. Her green eyes radiated the same warmth as they had 15 years ago when they met in a student bar. "Coffee's ready," he smiled, pouring her a cup. "Did you sleep well?" "Wonderfully, thank you." Lisa sat down in the chair opposite him, wrapping her hands around the cup. "I have a tough shift today. 2 new patients came in last night. What's on your schedule?" David flipped through the calendar on his phone. "Meeting with the Johnsons about home insurance. Then I have to go to the Millers. They want to increase their car insurance. Just a normal day." They ate breakfast in their usual silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Neighbors drove by outside, heading to work. Mrs. Peterson was walking her dachshund and waved to the Harrisons through the window. This ritual was repeated day after day, and David found it comforting. After Lisa left for work, David went up to his bedroom to change into his business suit. The Richmond insurance office was located in the city center, in an old brick building that his father had bought 30 years ago. David had inherited the business 5 years ago and was proud that he had not only retained the client base, but also expanded it. His workday began with sorting through the mail. Among the usual documents and bills was a letter from a law firm in a neighboring county. David frowned, not recognizing the sender, and opened the envelope. Inside was a notice that a Jessica Warner had named him as a contact in her will. The name meant nothing to him, so he set the letter aside, deciding to deal with it later. The meeting with the Johnsons went smoothly. The elderly couple wanted to insure their house against fire. There had been a number of fires in the area recently due to old wiring. David drew up a favorable policy for them and arranged for the documents to be signed the following week. In the afternoon, he headed to the Miller's house. On the way, he stopped at Mary's, a small cafe that served the best apple pie in town. Sitting at a corner table was his best friend, Tom Riley, a mechanic at an auto repair shop on the outskirts of town. "Dave, sit down, I just ordered coffee." Tom waved his hand. They had been friends since school, and despite their different paths in life, they met regularly to discuss news and share problems. "How's it going, Tom?" David sat down on the chair opposite him. "Busy?" "Not complaining. People drive, cars break down. That's our bread and butter. How are you? Is Lisa okay?" "Everything's great. Working, living our lives." David paused, then took a letter from his pocket. "I got something strange today. Some Jessica Warner included me in her will as a contact person. I don't recognize the name." Tom took the letter and scanned the text. "Maybe a distant relative or a client you forgot about?" "I don't think so. I remember all my clients well, especially those who make wills." David shook his head. "Probably a mistake. I'll call the lawyers tomorrow." They talked for another half hour about work, local news, and plans for the weekend. Tom was going fishing on the lake and invited David to join him. David promised to think about it. He hadn't had much time to relax lately. When he got home that evening, David found Lisa in the kitchen. She was cooking his favorite lasagna, humming to herself. The aroma of tomato sauce and melted cheese filled the house, creating a cozy atmosphere. "How was your day?" she asked without turning from the stove. "The usual. Meetings, paperwork." David hugged her from behind, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "How about you?" "Tough. One of the new patients had to have emergency surgery. Thank God everything turned out okay." Lisa turned around in his arms. "Sometimes this job is emotionally draining." Over dinner, they discussed their plans for the weekend. Lisa suggested visiting her sister in a neighboring town, but David remembered Tom's invitation. "How about staying home? Tom invited us fishing and we could have a barbecue in the garden." "Sounds good," Lisa agreed. "It's been a while since we've had anyone over." After dinner, David went up to his home office to sort through some papers. Lisa stayed downstairs to watch a TV show. Their evening ritual allowed each of them to do their own thing without disturbing the other. The study was in what used to be the children's room. They had once planned to have children, but Lisa never got pregnant. Over time, the subject of children became painful, and they tacitly agreed not to bring it up. David had furnished the room as a workspace, a desk, bookshelves, a safe for important documents. Sorting through the day's mail, he came across another letter from the law firm. Deciding to deal with it immediately, David opened his laptop and found the firm's phone number. Despite the late hour, the secretary on duty answered. "Good evening, this is David Harrison. I received a notification that a Jessica Warner named me as a contact person in her will. I'm afraid there's been a mistake. I don't know this woman." "One moment, sir," came the sound of papers rustling. Jessica Warner, 36 years old, died 3 days ago of a drug overdose. In her will, she named you as the husband of her former colleague, Lisa Harrison. David felt a chill run down his spine. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "According to our records, your wife, Lisa, worked with Miss Warner between 2004 and 2007 at the Elite Escorts agency. Miss Warner left a letter asking us to give you some of her belongings and documents." The world spun around David. 2004 to 2007. That was right before they met. Lisa always said she worked as a waitress in a restaurant, saving money to go to medical school. "Sir, can you hear me?" The secretary's voice seemed to come from far away. Yes, I'm here. When can I get these documents?" "Tomorrow after 2. Our office is located at 245 Main Street." David wrote down the address with a trembling hand and hung up. He sat motionless for several minutes, trying to comprehend what he had heard. Escort services. His Lisa, who went to church every Sunday, who blushed at dirty jokes, who was the embodiment of decency and virtue. He heard laughter coming from the TV downstairs. Lisa was watching a comedy, unaware that her world was about to collapse. David got up and went to the window. The streetlights were on, illuminating the familiar houses of his neighbors. Everything seemed the same as it had an hour ago, but something had fundamentally changed. He tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe there was another Lisa Harrison. But the secretary had been very specific. The husband of a former colleague. And the years matched the period before they met. David returned to his desk and turned on his computer. His fingers trembled as he typed Elite Escort Agency into the search engine. There were few results. A few mentions in police reports, an article in a local newspaper about the agency closing in 2008. Nothing specific, no photos or lists of employees. "David, are you going to bed?" Lisa's voice from the bedroom made him jump. "Soon, honey. I'm just finishing up some paperwork." He closed the browser and turned off the computer. He needed time to think. Tomorrow he would go to the lawyers and get those documents. Only then would he be able to understand if what he had heard was true. As he climbed the stairs to the bedroom, David felt each step was a struggle. Lisa was already in bed, reading a book in the soft light of the bedside lamp. She looked up and smiled at him, the same warm, loving smile he had seen every evening for the past 15 years. "Are you okay? You look tired." "Yes, just a lot of work." David changed into his pajamas, trying not to meet her gaze. Tomorrow might be a long day. Lying in the dark next to his wife, David listened to her steady breathing. She fell asleep quickly, as she always did after a hard shift. He lay with his eyes open, trying to reconcile the image of his wife with what he had heard on the phone. Escort. The word echoed in his head like a death sentence, destroying everything he had believed in for the past 15 years. David woke up at 5 in the morning without having slept a wink. Lisa was sleeping peacefully beside him, and in the morning light she looked so innocent that yesterday's phone call seemed like a nightmare. He got up carefully, trying not to wake her, and went down to the kitchen. The coffee was bitter. David had forgotten to add sugar, but he didn't bother to remake it. The bitterness in his mouth matched his mood. He sat by the window, watching Richmond wake up, and tried to come up with a plan. He had to be at the lawyer's office at 2 o'clock. Before that, he had to get through the day pretending that nothing had changed. "You're up early." Lisa's voice made him turn around. She stood in the doorway in her nightgown, disheveled and sleepy. "I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about work." David tried to smile. "Sorry if I woke you up." "Don't be sorry." Lisa came over and kissed him on the top of his head. "I'm working the day shift today, so I can have breakfast with you." They ate in silence. David furtively studied his wife's face, looking for any signs of deception, traces of that other life. But Lisa was the same as always, calm, caring, a little tired after yesterday's shift. "David, are you listening to me?" Lisa looked at him with concern. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "I asked about your plans for the weekend. You wanted to invite Tom over for a barbecue." Yes, of course. I'll call him today." David put down his fork. "Lisa, do you remember the time before we met? What did you do? Where did you work?" For a moment, a shadow flashed across his wife's eyes, but she quickly smiled. "Why are you asking?" "You know, I worked as a waitress in a restaurant saving up for college. Why are you asking?" "It's just that sometimes I feel like I know so little about your past." "Honey, my past isn't as interesting as you think. I was just a regular girl trying to get by and get an education." Lisa stood up and hugged him. "Now I have you, and that's all that matters." After she left, David couldn't concentrate on his work. He canceled his morning meetings and sat in his office, mindlessly shuffling through documents. At 1:30, he closed the office and drove to the address he had written down the day before. The law firm Brown and Partners was located in an old mansion that had been converted into offices. A secretary, an elderly woman with glasses, greeted David sympathetically. "Mr. Harrison, Mr. Brown is expecting you." James Brown turned out to be a man in his 60s with a gray beard and tired eyes. He invited David to sit down and took a small box out of the safe. "Before I can hand over Miss Warner's inheritance, I must explain the situation," the lawyer began. "Jessica was my client for the last 2 years. She was struggling with drug addiction and trying to start a new life. Unfortunately, she didn't make it." David nodded, not knowing what to say. She talked a lot about her past, especially about her time working in a specific service industry. Your wife was mentioned often. Jessica considered Lisa her only friend from that period. "What exactly did she say about my wife?" The lawyer paused. "Mr. Harrison, I understand this may come as a shock, but your wife did indeed work for the Elite Escorts agency from 2004 to 2007. Jessica had documents from that time." David felt the ground slip away beneath his feet. Any hope that this was a mistake was now completely gone. Jessica wanted Lisa to know that she never told her about their past. She respected your wife's desire to start a new life. Brown pushed the box closer. "Here are some photos, notes, and a letter Jessica wrote before she died." With trembling hands, David opened the box. On top was an envelope marked "To Lisa." Underneath were photographs. The first one made him gasp. The picture was of Lisa, but she looked completely different. She wore provocative makeup, a revealing dress, and a professional smile. Next to her stood an unfamiliar woman, apparently Jessica. Both looked young and beautiful, but there was an emptiness in their eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "Mr. Harrison?" The lawyer's voice seemed to come from far away. "I need some time." "Of course. Take the box home. But remember, Jessica wanted you to know the truth, not to destroy you, but to help you understand. Your wife went through a lot to become the person she is today." David took the box and walked out onto the street. The sun seemed too bright, the air too thin. He got into his car and sat there for a long time, holding the box on his lap, afraid to open it again. Instead of going home, he drove to Tom's workshop. He needed someone to talk to, someone who had known him all his life. Tom was working under the hood of an old Chevrolet, and the sound of his hammer was soothing. "Dave, what are you doing here during work hours?" Tom climbed out from under the hood, wiping his hands on a rag. "We need to talk. Seriously." Tom looked at him intently, then nodded to his assistant. "Jack, take a half-hour break." When they were alone, he pointed to a bench against the wall. "Sit down. What happened?" David told him everything, from yesterday's phone call to his visit to the lawyer. Tom listened silently, nodding occasionally. When David finished, there was silence. "Show me the photos," Tom finally said. David took the photos out of the box. Tom studied them for a long time, then handed them back. "That's definitely Lisa. Damn it, Dave. I don't know what to say." 15 years, Tom. She lied to me for 15 years. Every day, every night. I married a ghost. Wait, don't get so worked up. Maybe she had a reason for keeping quiet? What reason could possibly justify such a lie? David stood up and began pacing around the workshop. I trusted her with everything. My money, my house, my life, and she what? Was she a prostitute? What else? Tom stood up too. Listen, I understand that you're in shock, but think about it. What was she like for the last 15 years? Was she a good wife, faithful, caring? That doesn't matter. How can it not matter? It's the most important thing. Tom grabbed his friend by the shoulders. People change, Dave. Lisa changed. She became a nurse. She helps people. She became your wife. She loves you. Doesn't that mean anything? David broke free. You don't understand. She lied to me every day. When I told her how proud I was of her honesty, how much I valued her principles, she said nothing. She let me live in a fantasy. What would you have done if you had known the truth from the beginning? The question caught David off guard. He imagined himself at 27, meeting a girl who had honestly confessed her past. Would he have dated her? Would he have married her? I don't know. You see, maybe that's why she didn't say anything. She was afraid of losing you. David took the box and headed for the door. I need time to think. Dave, don't be stupid. Talk to her. Find out the truth. At home, David found a note from Lisa. I'm late at work. Dinner's in the fridge. Love you. It was the same note she had left hundreds of times before. But now every word seemed like a lie. He went up to his study and emptied the contents of the box onto the desk. In addition to the photos, there were documents, medical reports, schedules, even a timesheet. Everything was very official, like in a normal company. Only the services were completely different. At the bottom lay Jessica's notebook. David opened it at random. March 15th, 2006. Lisa cried again today. She says she can't take it anymore, that she wants to leave. But she still doesn't have enough money for school. She needs to hold on for another year. I'm trying to support her, but I'm barely holding on myself. David flipped through a few pages. May 2nd, 2006. Lisa met some guy at a cafe. She says he seems nice. I'm afraid she'll fall in love and tell him everything. Men don't forgive that kind of past. Another entry. August 10th, 2006. Lisa is getting more serious with this David guy. They've been dating for a month. She wants to quit her job, but she's afraid she won't have enough money to finish nursing school. I offered to lend her some, but she's too proud. David read entry after entry, and gradually a different picture emerged. In Jessica's notes, Lisa was not a promiscuous woman, but a desperate girl trying to escape poverty by the only means available to her. She saved every dollar for her education, lived on the breadline, and cried every night. The last entry in the notebook was dated October 2007. Lisa is leaving. She has saved enough money for her last semester. She is marrying this David in December. I'm happy for her, but I'm scared. What will happen if he finds out? Lisa says she'll tell him the truth after the wedding. I hope she has the courage. Some secrets eat you up inside. David closed the notebook. Lisa had planned to tell him the truth, but she didn't. Why? What stopped her? He remembered their first year of marriage. Lisa was nervous, often woke up from nightmares, and flinched at loud noises. He thought it was stress from school and her new life. Now he understood. It was a remnant of her past. The sound of the front door opening made him flinch. Lisa was home. David quickly put the documents back in the box and hid it in the safe. He needed time to decide what to do. David, are you home? His wife's voice echoed through the house. "Upstairs, in my office!" he shouted back. Lisa climbed the stairs, looking tired. It was a tough day. One patient died despite all our efforts. Sometimes I wonder if I should have become a nurse at all. David looked at her, trying to reconcile the image of a caring nurse with what he had seen in the photographs. "Do you regret your choice? My career choice? Sometimes, but not my life choice." She walked over and hugged him. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Every day I thank my lucky stars that I met you." David felt something tighten in his chest. Lisa was sincere. He knew her well enough to tell the difference between truth and lies. But that truth only applied to the present. The past remained a mystery. "Lisa, have you ever regretted getting married so quickly? Maybe we should have gotten to know each other better." She pulled away and looked at him in surprise. "Why are you asking me that? Did something happen?" "No, I was just thinking about us today, about how we met. Sometimes I feel like I don't know much about your past." "David, my past doesn't matter. What matters is our present and our future." Lisa sat down on the edge of the table. "Why dwell on what came before us? Because the past shapes who we are. I want to know what you've been through, what made you who you are." A shadow of fear flashed across Lisa's face, but she quickly smiled. "My past was boring. Work, school, trying to survive. Nothing interesting or romantic." David realized she wasn't going to tell him directly. Her fear of losing him was stronger than her desire to be honest. But now he knew the truth, and that knowledge burned inside him. "I'll go downstairs and heat up dinner," he said, heading for the door. "David." Lisa's voice stopped him. "Do you love me?" He turned around. She was sitting on the table, small and vulnerable, and there was fear in her eyes, the same fear he had seen in the photographs 20 years ago. "I do," he replied, and it was true. Despite everything, he loved her. But now that love was mixed with the pain of betrayal, Lisa smiled, but her eyes remained troubled. "I love you too, more than life itself." Left alone in his office, David realized he was at a crossroads. He could pretend he knew nothing and continue living in a fantasy, or he could demand the truth and risk destroying everything. There was no third option. The next 3 days were torture for David. He continued to play the role of a loving husband, but every word Lisa said, every gesture she made, was perceived through the prism of his knowledge of her past. When she talked about her work at the hospital, he thought about her former clients. When she was cooking dinner, he remembered the photos of her in revealing outfits. On Thursday morning at breakfast, his nerves gave way. "Lisa, do you remember the restaurant where you worked as a waitress? What was it called?" Lisa froze with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "Why do you want to know?" "I'm just curious. You talked about it so often, but you never mentioned the name." "That was a long time ago, David. Why bring it up? You can't remember the name of the restaurant where you worked for 3 years?" David couldn't stop, even though he saw Lisa turning pale. "The Golden Spoon," she said quietly, "but it closed a long time ago." David nodded, making a mental note to check that fact. "Do you remember the owner? Any colleagues?" "David, what's going on? Why are you interrogating me?" Lisa's voice took on a metallic edge. "I'm not interrogating you. I'm just trying to get to know my wife better." Lisa got up from the table without finishing her breakfast. "I have to get to work. Let's talk tonight." After she left, David called directory assistance and found out that the Golden Spoon restaurant had indeed existed and closed in 2009. Another lie, a small one, but a lie nonetheless. He couldn't concentrate at work. Clients complained about his absent-mindedness, and his secretary had to ask him to repeat his instructions twice. During his lunch break, David went to the city library and found old issues of local newspapers from 2007 to 2008. The article about the closure of the elite escorts agency was short, just a few lines about a police raid and the arrest of the owner for tax evasion. No details, no names of employees. But in the police reports, David found a mention that 8 women had been detained for questioning during the raid. They were released a few hours later without charges. Was Lisa among them? David imagined his young wife at the police station, frightened and humiliated, and felt a strange mixture of pity and disgust. He came home earlier than usual that evening and found Lisa in the kitchen. She was cooking his favorite dish, chicken and cream sauce, an attempt at reconciliation. "How was your day?" she asked without turning around. "Fine." David sat down at the table and watched her. "How was your day?" "Tough." A patient was brought in who had been beaten by her husband. She was young, almost a girl. She cried the whole shift. Lisa turned to him, and he saw tears in her eyes. "Sometimes I don't understand how men can do that to women." "Yes, it's terrible," David agreed, feeling a pang of conscience. He too had hurt his wife, albeit not physically. A tense silence fell over the dinner table. Lisa tried several times to strike up a conversation, but David responded with monosyllables. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "David, what's wrong with me? I feel like you're pulling away. If I've done something wrong, tell me." He looked at her, distraught, vulnerable, willing to do anything to save their marriage. His heart ached with pity, but his anger was stronger. "You haven't done anything wrong, Lisa. The problem is what you haven't done." "I don't understand. You haven't told me the truth. In 15 years of marriage." Lisa paled. "What are you talking about?" "Your past, your recent past." They stared at each other in silence for several seconds. David could see fear, panic, and despair fighting in his wife's eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she finally said, her voice trembling. "The Elite Escorts Agency, Jessica Warner, 2004 to 2007. Do I need to continue?" Lisa covered her face with her hands and moaned softly. When she looked up, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "How do you know?" "Jessica is dead. She left a will and documents. She wanted me to know the truth about your wife." "Oh my God!" Lisa stood up from the table and began pacing around the kitchen. "David, I can explain." "Explain what? How you lied to me every day for 15 years? How you pretended to be an innocent girl when I told you how much I valued your honesty?" "That was a long time ago. It has nothing to do with us." "It has nothing to do with us?" David also stood up, feeling rage rising from his stomach to his throat. "You were a prostitute, Lisa. You slept with men for money and you hid it from your husband." Lisa looked as if she had been slapped. "Don't you dare say that! You don't know what I've been through." "Then tell me, explain to me how a girl from a respectable family becomes a whore." The word hung in the air like a lash. Lisa stopped and looked at her husband as if he had killed her. "A whore?" she whispered. "You think I'm a whore?" David realized he had gone too far, but he couldn't stop. "What else do you call a woman who sells her body?" Lisa walked silently to the refrigerator, took out a bottle of water and drank it, trying to calm down. When she turned around, her tears had dried, but her face was stone. "You want the truth? You'll get the truth." Her voice was even and cold. "When I was 18, I lost my parents. The car crashed into a tree on a slippery road. The insurance only covered the funeral. The house had to be sold to pay off the debts." David wanted to say something, but Lisa raised her hand to stop him. "I had two choices: stay in my hometown, marry a local farmer, and spend my life raising cows, or try to get an education. I chose the latter. I came to Richmond, rented a room in a dorm, and enrolled in medical college." She sat down at the table, but didn't look at her husband. "Do you know how much medical school costs? And housing, food, textbooks? I worked as a waitress, cleaned office floors, sold flowers on the street. I worked 16 hours a day and still barely made ends meet." David felt his anger gradually give way to something else, but he stubbornly remained silent. "In my second year, I was expelled for non-payment. I owed the college $12,000. That was more than I could earn in a year doing odd jobs." Lisa finally looked at him. "And then I met Jessica. She recruited you?" "She helped me. Jessica was a student herself, studying psychology. But her family was rich, her parents paid for her education. She worked part-time at an escort agency, not out of necessity, out of curiosity." Lisa stood up and walked over to the window, staring into the darkness. "At first I refused, but then I thought, what's worse? Stay ignorant for the rest of my life or spend 3 years earning money for an education? I chose education. And you became a prostitute." I was an escort. I accompanied men to business dinners, the theater, receptions. Yes, sometimes it ended in bed, but not always. Sometimes, David repeated bitterly. Lisa turned to him. Yes, sometimes. I slept with men for money. Is that what you want to hear? I sold my body to get an education that allowed me to become a nurse and save people. And lie to your husband every day. I didn't lie, I just didn't tell him. It's the same thing. Lisa sat down on a chair, suddenly looking very tired. I planned to tell you, after the wedding. Jessica wrote it in her diary. I really was going to. But you didn't, because I was scared. Tears welled up in her eyes again. In the first months of our marriage, I saw how you treated me. You put me on a pedestal, called me an angel, told your friends what a decent wife I was. And I realized that if I told you the truth, I would lose you. You didn't give me a choice. Because I knew what choice you would make! Lisa stood up, her voice growing louder. You would have left me. Even now, after knowing me for 15 years, you call me a whore! David realized she was right. 27 years ago, he would never have dated a girl with that kind of past. His upbringing, his prejudices, his ideas about morality would never have allowed him to do so. But I had a right to know, he said more quietly. Yes, you did. And I was a coward. Lisa wiped away her tears. I thought about it every day. Every time you said you loved me for my honesty, I felt like a liar. But time passed. We were happy. And I convinced myself that the past didn't matter. But it does matter. The past is part of you. No, David. The past is what I left behind. I am the woman I became with you. A nurse, a wife, a person who helps others. They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen, and the distance between them seemed insurmountable. David felt exhausted, from anger, from pain, from disappointment. I need time to think, he said finally. How much time? I don't know. Lisa nodded. I'll stay at my sister's. I'll give you some space. No, I'll go to Tom's. David. He was already heading for the door when she called after him. I love you, and I don't regret hiding the truth if it gave us 15 happy years. He didn't answer. Tom had a sofa in his garage, where David sometimes dozed off when they stayed up late drinking beer and talking. Tom greeted his friend without question, simply opening 2 cans of beer and sitting down next to him. Did you talk to her? Yes. And? David recounted their conversation. Tom listened silently, nodding occasionally. That's a difficult story, he said finally. Do you excuse her? I don't justify or condemn her. I'm trying to understand. Tom took a sip of beer. Be honest. If you had known about her past from the beginning, would you have married her? David was silent for a long time. Probably not. See? She understood that. But she didn't give me a choice. Dave, what was your life like for those 15 years? Were you happy? Yes, but was she a good wife? Yes. Did she cheat on you? No. Then what's the problem? Is it that she slept with other men before she met you? That she lied to me? Tom put the jar on the table. Listen, I'm not going to tell you what to do. It's your life, your choice. But think about it. What's more important? Who she was 20 years ago or who she became with you? David spent 2 nights on the sofa in the garage. During that time, Lisa called 3 times, but he didn't answer. Tom had to take time off work to look after his friend, who was drinking more than usual and looked like someone who had suffered a great loss. On Saturday morning, David decided to go home. He needed to pick up his things. He had decided to live separately for a while to sort out his feelings. The house greeted him with silence. Lisa's car was gone. She was probably still at her sister's. David went up to the bedroom and started packing his clothes into a bag. There was a note on the nightstand. David, I understand that you're angry, and I understand why. I'm sorry for lying. I'm not asking you to forgive my past. I haven't come to terms with it myself. But please don't write off our 15 years. If you decide we can try to work things out, call me. If not, I won't push you. I love you always, Lisa. David folded the note and put it in his pocket. As he gathered his things, he noticed the family photos on the dresser. Their wedding, their honeymoon, birthdays, holidays. In all the pictures, Lisa was smiling, sincerely, brightly, happily. Could it all have been a lie? He picked up a photo from their 5th anniversary. They were standing in the garden behind their house, embracing each other, both tanned and content after their vacation. David remembered that day. They woke up late, spent the whole day in bed making love and planning their future. Lisa talked about the children she wanted to have, about a bigger house, about growing old together. Was it a game? Or was she really happy at that moment and had forgotten her past? The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Lisa. "David, are you home?" "Yes, I'm picking up my things." Pause. "Have you made a decision?" "I need time, a lot of time." "How much?" "I don't know, Lisa, I honestly don't know." Another pause. "I'll be back tomorrow morning, I need to pick up something for work." "I'll be gone before you get back." "David." She sounded tearful. "I know I have no right to ask, but don't make a rash decision, please." He wanted to say something cruel, something that would hurt her as much as he was hurting, but instead he just shut down. After gathering his things, David walked around the house one last time. Every room held memories of their life together. The kitchen where they had breakfast every morning, the living room where they watched movies, snuggled up together, the garden they planted together. It all seemed like a stage set for a play in which he played the role of a happy husband, unaware that his wife was playing the role of an innocent woman. But were these just roles? Or were they really happy, despite the lies that lay at the heart of their relationship? David closed the door of the house and got into his car. He had to decide where to go, to Tom, to a hotel, or find an apartment and try to start a new life. While he was thinking, the news came on the radio. Among other things, they reported the death of a Jessica Warner, who had been found dead in her apartment 3 days earlier. The police had not ruled out suicide. David turned off the radio. Jessica was dead. Lisa was suffering, and he was torn between love and betrayal. And all this suffering was because of events that had happened 20 years ago, which may have long since lost their meaning. A week had passed since David left home. He rented a small apartment on the outskirts of Richmond, in an old apartment building where mostly divorced men and students lived. The apartment was gloomy and faceless, the complete opposite of the cozy home he and Lisa had spent years creating. Work became his only salvation. David threw himself into his insurance work with manic determination, staying late at the office. His colleagues began to notice the changes. He became irritable, distracted, and often forgot about meetings. On Wednesday evening, while sorting through another stack of documents, David stumbled upon the Harrison family's insurance policy. It was the joint life insurance policy for $1 million that they had taken out 5 years ago. The beneficiary in the event of Lisa's death was David, and vice versa. And he stared at the document for a long time, and dark thoughts involuntarily entered his mind. If Lisa were gone, the problem would disappear by itself. There would be no agonizing choice between forgiveness and divorce. There would be no humiliation of divorce in a small town where everyone knows each other. David shook his head, chasing away these thoughts. He was tired, that was all. He needed to go home, that is, to his rented apartment, and rest. Tom called every day trying to get his friend to meet up. On Thursday, David finally agreed. "You look awful," Tom said when they met at Jack's bar on the outskirts of town. "When was the last time you ate a decent meal?" "I don't remember." David ordered a whiskey, his third of the evening. "Why? I've lost my appetite." "Dave, you can't go on like this. You have to make a decision." "What decision? Forgive a liar or become a divorcee at 42? What about the third option?" "What's that?" "Try to understand her." David laughed bitterly. "Understand? I understand perfectly well. She sold herself and then cheated on me for 15 years. "Damn it, Dave, enough already!" Tom slammed his fist on the table. "She was a young girl trying to survive. She grew into a beautiful woman and a great wife. A great liar." "Fine, let's say she was. So what? You get divorced and then what? Find yourself a saint? Or spend the rest of your life complaining that you lost love because of your pride?" David finished his whiskey and ordered another. The alcohol didn't help, but at least it dulled the sharp edges of the pain. "You know what pisses me off the most?" he said, staring into his glass. "It's not that she was a prostitute. It's not that she slept with other men. It's that she didn't trust me with the truth. For 15 years, she thought I was too weak to handle her past." Maybe she was right. David looked up sharply. "What did you say?" "Maybe she saw you for what you are. Look at yourself. You found out the truth and ran away. You didn't try to understand. You didn't give her a chance to explain herself. You just ran away." "I didn't run away." "What do you call that? A manly thing to do?" David stood up, feeling anger rising. "Don't you dare judge me. You don't know what it's like." "I do. My first wife hid something from me too. It turned out that before we met, she had had an affair with my cousin." David slowly sat back down. "You never told me that." "Because I forgave her. We lived together for 8 years and were happy. We divorced for other reasons. We just fell out of love with each other." "That's different." "It's no different. A secret is a secret. Pain is pain. But you can choose whether to let that pain destroy your life or try to overcome it." They drank in silence for another half hour. When Tom left, David was left alone with a bottle of whiskey and his thoughts. The bartender, an elderly man with sad eyes, glanced at him sympathetically from time to time. "Women's problems?" he asked, wiping glasses. "You could say that. Is she worth it?" David thought of Lisa. He thought about her smile in the morning, about how she fell asleep curled up next to him, about how she took care of him when he was sick, about the 1,000 little signs of love and care over the past 15 years. "Yes," he replied. "She's worth it." "Then go home and make up." David paid and went outside. It was past midnight, and the streets of Richmond were empty. He got into his car but didn't start the engine. He had to make a decision, a final decision. Tom was right. Lisa was right. He had run away instead of trying to work things out. His pride was more important than their love. David took out his phone and dialed his home number. A few rings, then a familiar voice. "Hello? Lisa, it's me." Pause. "David, are you okay? You sound strange." "I've been drinking. We need to talk." "Now? It's late." "Now. I'll be home in half an hour." "David, maybe tomorrow, when you're sober?" "No. If I don't come now, I'll never come." Another pause. "Okay, I'll wait." The drive home took 20 minutes. David drove slowly, trying to think of what to say to his wife. Would he apologize for his reaction? Ask her to start over? Or tell her he couldn't forgive her? The house greeted him with light in the windows. Lisa was waiting. David parked and sat in the car for a few minutes, gathering his courage. Finally, he got out and headed for the front door. Lisa opened the door without waiting for him to ring the bell. She was in her bathrobe, her hair tousled, her eyes red. She had been crying. At the sight of her husband, her face contorted with pain and hope at the same time. "Come in," she said quietly. David walked into the living room and sat down in his favorite chair. Everything in the house was the same as before, but the atmosphere had changed. The silence was tense and heavy. "Would you like some coffee or water?" Lisa asked, standing in the doorway. "I don't want anything." David looked at her. "Sit down. We need to talk." Lisa sat down on the sofa opposite him, folding her hands in her lap. "I'm listening." "I've been thinking about us all week, about what happened, and I've realized something important." Lisa held her breath. "I've realized that I can't forgive you." The words sounded like a sentence. Lisa turned pale but didn't cry. "I can't forgive your past," David continued. "I can't forgive you for not trusting me with the truth. 15 years, Lisa. 15 years you thought I wasn't worthy of knowing who you really are. That's not true. That's exactly what it is." David stood up, feeling the alcohol and emotions making his voice louder. "You decided for me. You decided that I couldn't accept your past. You didn't give me a choice." "David, please calm down." "Calm down?" He began to pace the room. "I wasted 15 years of my life on a woman who turned out to be an illusion. My decent, honest wife is a prostitute." "Don't call me that." Lisa stood up too, her voice taking on a metallic edge. "I was a young girl trying to survive, and you became a liar who cheated on her husband for years." "I didn't cheat. I just didn't talk about the past. It's the same thing, damn it! They stood on opposite sides of the room, yelling at each other, and David suddenly realized that their marriage was truly over. There was no way back. Too much pain, too much anger. "You know what?" he said, suddenly feeling strangely calm. "Enough. I'm tired of this, tired of you. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." Lisa froze. "David, don't. We can try." "No, we can't. You killed our love with your lies. David, please." She took a step toward him, reaching out her hands. "I love you. We can fix this. Get away from me." David pushed her harder than he meant to. Lisa lost her balance and fell, hitting her head on the coffee table. The sound of the blow seemed deafening in the silence of the house. "Lisa!" David rushed to her, but it was too late. She lay motionless, her eyes open but unseeing. A dark pool slowly spread from under her head. David grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. "Lisa! Lisa, wake up!" But there was no response. Her neck was bent at an unnatural angle. She must have broken her vertebrae when she fell. Death was instantaneous. David sat on the floor next to his wife's body, unable to believe what had happened. Just a minute ago, they were arguing, and now Lisa was dead. He didn't want to kill her. He just pushed her away in a fit of rage. It was an accident. But who would believe him? A husband who had discovered his wife's past came home drunk and killed her in a fight. It would be obvious to the police. David stood up, his legs trembling, and looked around. He had to think of what to do. Should he call the police and explain that it was an accident? Or an idea came to him unexpectedly. The apartment was on the outskirts of town, rented. No one knew he lived there. He could leave, create an alibi, say he hadn't been home for a week. But first he had to think everything through. David went up to the bedroom and changed his clothes. He put the clothes he was wearing in a bag. They would have to be destroyed. Going downstairs, he carefully wiped down all the surfaces he could touch. He took one last look at Lisa. She was lying in an unnatural position, her eyes staring at the ceiling. Her face was calm, almost peaceful. Finally, her suffering was over. He no longer had to hide his past or fear exposure. David left the house through the back door, got into his car, and drove away. At his apartment, he took a shower, burned his clothes in the sink, and went to bed. In the morning, he was awakened by a knock on the door. "Mr. Harrison? Detective Michael Connor, Richmond Police. Can we talk?" Two men in plain clothes stood at the door. The older one, about 45, with graying temples and tired eyes, showed his ID. "What's this about?" David asked, pretending to be sleepy. "About your wife. This morning, neighbors found her dead." David looked shocked. "What? Lisa is dead. How did this happen?" "We were hoping you could tell us. Can we come in?" The detectives entered the apartment and looked around. Connor took out his notebook. "When was the last time you saw your wife?" "A week ago. We were having problems in our marriage. I moved out." "What kind of problems?" David paused, pretending to be struggling internally. "I found out about her past. It turns out that before we met, she worked in the sex industry." Connor nodded. "And how did you react?" "Badly. I left the house. We haven't spoken all week." "Where were you last night?" "Drinking at Jack's bar. Then I came here and went to bed." "What time?" "Around 2 in the morning, I think." Connor wrote it down. "Any witnesses?" "The bartender, other patrons. Tom Riley was there too, but he left early." "We'll check it out." The detective closed his notebook. "Mr. Harrison, who do you think could have killed your wife?" "Killed her?" David feigned shock. "I thought it was an accident." "No. Someone hit her. She fell and broke her neck. We're treating this as a murder." David sat down on the sofa and covered his face with his hands. "I don't know. Lisa was a good person. Who would want her dead? Maybe someone from her past. We're looking into all possibilities." The detectives left, promising to contact him if they had any further questions. David remained alone in the empty apartment, realizing that his life had changed forever. Lisa was dead. He had killed her in a fit of rage without meaning to. Now he had to live with that burden and hope that the police wouldn't find any evidence. Lisa's funeral was held on Wednesday. The small St. Paul's church was full. Nurses from the hospital, neighbors, and old acquaintances came to say goodbye to a woman whom everyone considered a paragon of virtue. David sat in the front row in a black suit, pretending to be a grief-stricken widower. The pastor spoke of Lisa as an example of Christian charity, of how she helped the sick and needy. Every word cut David to the quick, not because of his loss, but because of the hypocrisy. If these people knew the truth about the deceased's past, Lisa Harrison was a shining light in our community, said the pastor. Her kindness and selflessness will remain in our hearts forever. David nodded in the right places, occasionally dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. The role of grieving husband came surprisingly easily to him. Perhaps he was truly grieving, not for Lisa, but for the life that could have been if not for her lies. After the service, people approached him to offer their condolences and help. David thanked them and promised to get in touch if he needed anything. Tom stood nearby, supporting his friend as one does at such times. "Hang in there, Dave," he whispered. "This too shall pass." If only he knew. Detective Connor was also at the funeral, watching the crowd from a distance. David could feel his gaze, but tried not to show his unease. The police often attended the funerals of victims. It was part of the investigation. After the ceremony, Connor approached David. "My condolences, Mr. Harrison. I understand how difficult this is." "Thank you, Detective. Any news on the case?" "We're still working on it. I'd like to talk to you again when you're ready." "Sure. Anything specific?" "A few details that need to be clarified. Would tomorrow afternoon be convenient?" David nodded, though inside he felt anxious. "I'll be in the office after 2. At home, now his home again, David removed all traces of that terrible night. He had to throw out the coffee table and buy a new one. He also replaced the carpet, telling his neighbors he couldn't bear to look at the spot where Lisa's body had been found. He methodically went through the house, checking every detail. The police had already examined the crime scene, but David knew they would be back. He had to be ready. The next day, at exactly 2 o'clock, Detective Connor showed up at the insurance company's office. He was accompanied by a young female detective, whom he introduced as Sergeant Rodriguez. "Mr. Harrison, we've reviewed the witness statements from the bar," Connor began, settling into the client chair. "Tom Riley confirmed that he was with you until 11 o'clock. The bartender remembers you staying longer." "Yes, I finished 1 drink. It was tough." "I see. What time did you leave the bar?" David looked thoughtful. "I don't remember exactly. Late, maybe around 1 in the morning. The bartender says he closed at midnight and you left 10 minutes before closing." "Possibly. Time passed slowly." "Passed." Rodriguez took out her tablet. "Mr. Harrison, we checked the surveillance camera footage in the area. Your car was spotted on Main Street at 12:47 a.m., heading toward your home." David felt his heart skip a beat. "That's impossible. I was driving to my apartment. But the route to your apartment is via Oak Street, not Main Street. I may have stopped for cigarettes, or I was just driving without thinking about the road. I was upset." Connor leaned forward. "Mr. Harrison, we also found your fingerprints in the house, on the door handles, the stair railings, in the bedroom." "Of course you did. It's my house. I've lived there for 15 years. "But you said you hadn't been home in a week." "I hadn't. Those prints could have been left there last time." Rodriguez shook her head. "Our experts say that some of the prints are fresh, no more than 2 or 3 days old." David stood up and walked over to the window, trying to buy some time. Thoughts were racing through his head. He had to come up with something, find an explanation. "Okay," he said finally. "I was home that night. I lied because I was ashamed." The detectives exchanged glances. "Ashamed of what?" "I came home drunk and wanted to make up with Lisa, but she was already asleep. I didn't want to wake her, so I spent the night in the guest room and left in the morning. I didn't want you to think I was bothering her." "And what time did you leave in the morning?" "Early, around 6. Lisa was still asleep." Connor wrote it down. "So when we talked to you about your wife being found dead, you already knew about it?" "No, I didn't know." David turned to them. "When I left, she was alive. She was asleep in her bedroom." "Mr. Harrison," Sergeant Rodriguez stood up, "the medical examiner determined the time of death to be between midnight and 2 a.m. That's when you said you were at home." David realized he was being cornered. He had to change tactics. "Detective Connor, are you implying that I killed my wife?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking you directly. Did you kill Lisa Harrison?" David looked at them both, the tired, experienced detective and the young sergeant with burning eyes. They knew. Maybe not all the details, but they knew the gist of it. "No," he said firmly. "I didn't kill her." "Then explain how your wife died at the exact time you were at home." "I don't know. Maybe someone broke in after I fell asleep." No signs of forced entry. The alarm didn't go off. Then it was someone she knew, someone she let in. Connor closed his notebook. "Mr. Harrison, we'll continue our investigation. You're free to go for now, but please don't leave town." After the detectives left, David sat in his office realizing that time was running out. They would be back with an arrest warrant. He had to act. That evening, he met Tom at the same bar where they had been on that fateful night. "Tom, I need a favor." "What is it?" "The police suspect me of Lisa's murder. If anything happens, take care of the funeral and the house. All the documents are in the safe." Tom looked closely at his friend. "Dave, you didn't kill her, did you?" David didn't answer. "God, Dave, tell me you didn't kill her." "I didn't mean to kill her, Tom. I just pushed her away during an argument. She fell badly." Tom turned pale. "Damn it. Why didn't you tell me the truth right away? It was an accident." Who's going to believe that? A husband who finds out about his wife's past kills her that same night? It looks like premeditated murder. "But you'll find a lawyer. You'll defend yourself." "Tom, I don't stand a chance. The evidence is against me. I have a motive. I'll get life." Tom was silent for a long time, then nodded. "What are you going to do?" "What I have to do." The next morning, Detective Connor received a call from the dispatcher. "Detective, we have a suicide. David Harrison." Connor arrived at the Harrisons' house and saw an ambulance, police cars, and curious neighbors. David was hanging in the garage, tied to a rope attached to a ceiling beam. A note lay on the workbench. "Detective Connor, you were right. I killed Lisa. I didn't want to, but I did. When I found out about her past, I couldn't forgive her. I came home drunk that night and we got into a fight. I pushed her in anger and she fell and broke her neck. I can't live with this burden. Please forgive me for lying. David Harrison." Connor folded the note. The case was closed, but there was no sense of satisfaction. 2 lives had been destroyed because of secrets from the past and an inability to forgive. "Detective?" Sergeant Rodriguez approached him. "What's next?" "Next, we close the case and move on to the next murder." Connor walked out of the garage and looked at the house where a happy family had once lived. Now it stood empty, a silent witness to a tragedy that could have been avoided. Tom Riley arrived an hour after the police were called. He stood next to the house for a long time, remembering his friend. David wasn't a bad man, just proud and incapable of forgiveness. That pride cost him everything. "Mr. Riley?" Detective Connor approached him. "My condolences." "Thank you." Tom wiped his eyes. "He asked me to help with the funeral. I'll take care of that." He was a good friend. Not good enough, apparently. Maybe if I had talked to him more. "Don't blame yourself. Some people can't live with guilt." Tom nodded and walked to his car. In 2 days, he would arrange David's funeral. Small, modest. There wouldn't be many people who wanted to say goodbye. Then he would sell the house and settle his affairs. The story of David and Lisa Harrison would become a local legend, a warning about what family secrets and an inability to forgive could lead to. People would shake their heads and say the tragedy could have been avoided, but it was too late. Too late for forgiveness, too late for understanding. All that remained was an empty house and 2 graves in the Richmond cemetery, silent witnesses to a love destroyed by lies and pride. Detective Connor got into his car and drove to the station. He had to write his report and close the case. Another family tragedy in a small town where nothing ever seemed to happen. But Connor knew the truth. The most terrible crimes are not committed on the streets, but in the silence of homes where love turns to hate and secrets become murder weapons.